Hi there. This is the fourth in the series of videos where I've been looking at the myth of why most people consider that it is not possible for an adult to learn a second language to native-like proficiencies. The first reason I looked at was translation and why excessive use of it actually undermines your ability to learn a new language and especially to get to the high levels. The second reason I talked about in the following week was about the issue of passion and why without having real passion in the learning that you're doing, achieving these levels is not really possible. Anyway, if you want to listen in more depth about these first two reasons, just go back to the clips and I'm sure you can find it easily from here. So what I want to talk about today is the third reason, and this is to do with the fact that even though we understand that language is a skill, in fact, most practices that people do, and you've been taught at school, right through school, university, is all about seeing language as knowledge. This is such an important factor that it really deserves its own spot, really, and to be looked at very, very carefully, because it's easy to skim past and say, oh yeah, I know that, but the implications of fully understanding what is a skill and what you have to do to actually learn language as a skill is something that has not really fully permeated into our learning and teaching culture. So you may be wondering about what I actually mean here, and so I'll give you a few examples. The first one is memorization. Now, I suspect that most language learners of learning any language would have used this practice. Basically, you take a piece of language like a word or a phrase or even maybe a grammar rule and you try to commit it to memory. I'm sure you all know what memorization is. Now, this practice rests on the notion that language is a piece of knowledge that you can memorize, that you can take, put into your brain and then use later. Now I ask you, in what skill can you think of? I'll mention practical skills because they're the best ones to talk about, because it's easy to see the parallels and the principles are identical. So in what practical skill, for example, cooking, basketball, weaving, piano playing, whatever, has anybody sat down and worked at memorizing some aspect of it? What guitar player will try to memorize the chords? This is how I hold my fingers, I've got to memorize it. They don't do that. What they do is they do the thing. So they play the chords. And playing the chords is a physical skill. It goes into a kind of memory, without a doubt, by doing it. But it's not memorization. Basically, by doing it, you learn these things. And that's the critical difference between memorization and learning something through doing it. Another example is repetition. You repeat something because you want to memorize it. Now, again, a basketball player will repeat shooting baskets time and time again. But the difference is that they're trying to achieve something and they see by doing it whether they've achieved it or not. And by doing that, they then adjust what they did for the next time and make it a little bit better. So everything is based on what you can do. It's not based on some bit of memory that you're trying to put in here somehow. And as language is a skill, you can't access these random bits of information, and that's why people get stuck, because they're trying to access this random bits of memory with no connection to anything else. They're just planted in the brain, it's just sitting there. And of course, when you try to speak or try to use the language, these bits don't jump back. And this is one of the reasons why so many people say, look, I've learned all these words, I've learned all this, I've learned all that, but I can't seem to be able to use it. Well, fundamentally, the reason is because they learnt it the wrong way. So another example I wish to talk about is grammar. Many people go and study the grammar rules, and you go into a book, look at the grammar rules, you try to understand it, and then you do some exercises on it. And so all of this, again, is to do with a kind of memory. It's a little bit different because it's also based on understanding. But understanding is not a skill. Well, it is a skill, understanding is a skill, but understanding of itself is not a language skill. And so language skills are what we're talking about here. So that's why even though, for example, you know a grammar rule and then you can do all these exercises on it, it doesn't actually mean you're going to be able to use it when you need it, because you've learned something not as a skill, you've learned it as a piece of knowledge and understanding that you've put into your brain in a different part of the brain where it needs to be. There are some people, of course, who can take all this what they've been taught in school or how they've learnt it in this way and transform it back into a skill. Now, so what these people do is they've actually unconsciously worked out a process of transforming it into a skill. And because no one ever gets taught this, most people never work it out, and as a consequence, most people get stuck. Now, the interesting thing is, even the ones who get to a high level through doing this process will never achieve native-like levels because it requires something else at the higher levels, and that skill development they haven't actually completely mastered. Another big problem that comes out that by working at language in this way, you actually end up feeling disempowered by the whole process and losing the passion, because the person learning knows that, and I've done all this work and I can't be able to speak. And so what does that do? It basically cuts your legs off, as it were. It actually disempowers you. It takes away your passion. It takes away your gut urge to learn the language, because you feel that I can't do it. There's something wrong with me. I haven't got the genes. I haven't got that aptitude. Well, you do have it. It's just that you've been going about it in the wrong way, and that's why you've got stuck. So by now you may be wondering, well, what can I do if I don't do all these things? Well, obviously in such a short time as we have here, I can't go into the nuts and bolts of it. But what I can talk about are a few fundamental principles. The first one is that skills are built from the bottom up. So any skills you can think about, it's like a layering of skill levels. So you can't get to the higher levels without probably mastering the lower ones. Make sure that whenever you learn something, you build it on what you can already do, not on what you know. Because when you start building on things that you know but don't do, you're actually creating new problems for yourself that's going to lead you down paths you don't want to be. So always come back to this whole notion of what can I actually do, what can I actually say properly or fluently or confidently, and then build on that. If you stick to just that one principle, that'll get you a long way. Also, as you go up higher to the higher levels, and you want to widen and when you deepen your language skills, make sure that you're building them on a firm structure. So if you go about deepening and widening all your language skills, and there are faulty layers of skills underneath, basically what that's going to do is create some problems. It's going to embed the problems even deeper, and it'll be a bit more difficult to unpack. You can certainly fix the skills at any stage, but the higher you go, you have to go dive deeper and deeper to fix these things up. The other important thing in working with language as a skill is up to you really to start to notice where you're struggling, where are the problems, where are the issues. And so this whole focus has to be of raising your awareness, of becoming more sensitive to things, of becoming more perceptive about what's going on with your language and how people react to you and how you sound compared to others. So the things you notice here is food for you on what you need to do next. So rather than go to a book and think, what do I need to learn, focus on what am I not doing as I need to do, and then work on that skill. And that brings me to the other point is, it's really important to learn to notice if you don't, that you're making improvements. So for example, I'm working on this particular bit of language, for example, the articles. Before I really was not doing them really that well, and now I'm doing it better and better all the time. I'm getting a better and better understanding of how it works. I'm actually using it at the right points in time. If you can notice that, it'll give you confidence in yourself, and it'll give you some feeling for yourself, I can do this, and your skills will start rising. So noticing what's going wrong and noticing what you've done and noticing how you've improved is critical when you go onto the path of improving your language as a skill. So of course there's a lot more that can be said here, but I hope you have a sense now of why this particular leg of this myth, the third one, is such an important one, and why it has to be chopped down. Basically why it has to be gotten rid of in your arsenal of learning, because it'll keep undermining you, it'll keep giving you problems down the road forevermore as long as you keep learning language in that way. So I hope this talk has been of value to you, and I look forward to talking to you again next week about the fourth and final leg of what's been holding up this myth. Thank you for listening. It's been Andrew Weiler here.